name is Stephanie, and in this little episode, I wanted to share with you 2 projects that stemmed from one pattern. I want to say completely different, but they're not completely different because the function remains the same, but maybe the look and overall end result is a little different. But I thought instead of having them buried into another full-on episode, that I would just create like a little mini one so that it was easier to direct people to that information should it be a project that you might want to create for yourself or for somebody else. The pattern I'm talking about is The Cooler Side of Warm by Melissa, who had initially designed it for Espace Tricot. Melissa is currently the owner of the company Sonder Yarn Co., and this is still a free pattern that's available on Ravelry. I don't know if it's available elsewhere. The Cooler Side of Warm is a cowl that is knit from bottom up. I will show a picture of it here on the screen so you can see what it looks like in its original design form. Both of mine were knit slightly different from the original design, and I did not use the yarn that's called for in the pattern. So it is knit bottom up. You have a split hem in the beginning, so you're knitting ribbing flat for a set number of inches. I believe it's 4 inches. And then you switch to knitting stockinette in the round, so you'll join it. And I did my join a little different from the pattern as well. And then in the original one, you will do some deep creases that are spaced out, as it says in the pattern, by number of inches knit. And then you will end up with ribbing on the very top of the cowl. So I have my first one here. Let me grab it. So my first one looks like this. I have talked about this in a previous episode. I'll link to that here so I don't talk too much about it, but I love how this turned out. The split hem is here. I did not knit the bottom ribbing as long as I was supposed to. I think I thought I did, but I might be like ½ an inch short, so not a ton. And then the way I did my join is that once I was going to join in the round, I slipped 1 stitch from the left to the right, and then I slipped the second stitch on the right hand needle off that needle, so over that first stitch, the one that was slipped, so that joined the 2, and then I just continued from there. And I used a US 7 needle, which is a 4.5 millimeter needle. That I striped in. The original is a solid, and the yarn I used is Purl Soho Note, and that is a very soft merino and alpaca blend yarn, and I love it. It is next to skin soft for me. It is non-superwash, but I feel 0 prickle, and it is super warm. It is very drapey due to the alpaca content, but the merino still gives it some structure and is a very round yarn. The colors are heathered, and the blue is vintage celadon, and the brown is raw sienna. This one I called Earth and Sky for the colors, and I just love how I striped in the 2 colors. They don't really blend, but they don't really fade, but they do change in the width of the stripes. So the brown gets smaller and smaller, and the blue starts small and gets bigger and bigger until I get to the ribbing on the top. So the ribbing on the top is all blue and the ribbing on the bottom is all brown. I'm going to take off what I'm wearing now so I can show you this one. But I love how this one fits. It is so warm under my jacket. And the ribbing on the top section gives it just a little bit of structure so it still stays. And the split hem ensures that the back of my neck is covered, which I find essential. I do not like it when the back of my neck is cold, and I feel like with most cowls, that back portion still ends up exposed, just the way it lays. And so this split hem allows it to spread nicely across the top of my chest, the upper part of my back, and it still keeps me nice and warm up in the front. And then with this one being so long, I can fold it in on itself, which gives it even more structure, but also double layers up this portion in the front. It also blocks wind nicely when I have my coat over it, and it's just very cozy and comfortable, and I just love this one. So then once I made this one, I thought, okay, I have an idea for another one. So I'm going to take this off and show you the second one I did. I'm going to actually tie my hair up so it makes it hopefully a little bit easier to see. Okay, so here is my second one, and I named this one Winter Sun. And so the main difference here is that the entire thing is a knit one, purl one rib. So the other one just had ribbing along the bottom and the top, but this one I decided to do ribbing the entire way. I still cast on the same number of stitches. I still joined in the round the same way, but I did knit the full 4 inches of the ribbing for the split hem on this one. And then I continued in this golden yellow color called Warm Honey, I think I have it written down as Warm Honey. Oh, and this yarn is Purl Soho's Cashmere Merino Bloom. And so this is a DK weight 75/25 extra fine merino cashmere. It is definitely a very luxurious yarn. Both of them are, and at higher price points. Because I have smaller amounts of them, I feel like they are really nice for an accessory. The note yarn I was gifted as yarn support, and this cashmere merino bloom I've just been slowly collecting with the 25% off sales over the years. Have Warm Honey here, and then this navy is called Night Blue, and then this periwinkle color is Hydrangea Blossom, and then this peachy pink is Conch Shell. So you can see on this one there's a slight funneling up to the top, and so the way I achieved that was not by doing any decreases. So the first one had some decreases, but this one I decided not to do decreases and instead change my needle size. So I used, I think 5 different needles maybe as I went to keep narrowing it as I got to the top, which also then provided more structure on the top. I liked the bottom portion to be more drapey, but I wanted the top portion by my neck to have a little more structure, and the way I achieved that was by tightening up that fabric density by going down in needle size. So this yarn is classified as closer to DK weight, and so I started with a US 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter, and then after a bit, I went to a US 6, 4 millimeter, and then I went to a US 5, which is 3.75 millimeter, and then I went to a US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter, and then I ended on a US 3, which is a 3.25 millimeter. If I got any of those numbers wrong, I will have it here on the screen. But yeah, and then I finished it. I finished it with a sewn bind off along the top. It looks very tidy. It is still stretchy, so it makes it easy to go over my head. And I started with a 24-inch cable in the beginning, and by the time I got to the end, I was using, I think, a 16-inch cable. So I'm going to put this one on for you so you can see how it looks. So again, I didn't change any of the stitch counts for this one. I just changed my needle size, and that adjusted the circumference of the cowl. So, turn around here. So the back is still covered. The front is also covered, and there's still nice and coziness in the draping around the neck area here, and the top portion of the neck isn't so drapey that it doesn't provide any coverage. I think that is another one of my pet peeves about cowls, is that not only is the back exposed, but the front's also exposed because it is so loose that it just hangs, and especially with colorwork ones, you don't even see the colorwork because it's all bunched up on itself. So this one, I decided to do stripes, and then I can still see the stripes because I can see the colors. They're more color blocked maybe because they're bigger stripes. I can also tuck this top portion in to provide a little more structure in this top portion if I want, or just to make it not as long, but it's still drapey even with the 1x1 rib, just based on the yarn choice that I made. And there's still a little bit of structure, again, based on yarn choice, but also because of the ribbing. The ribbing makes it just a lot less fluid. The first one I made is super fluid and very, very drapey due to the stockinette in this section, but because this is all 1x1 rib, it just has a little bit more structure, but still drapey. So I love this one as well, and I think I'm going to get a lot of wear out of both of them. The first one I made in January, and I wore it I think almost every day. I was alternating it with another cowl, and then this one I just recently finished, and I really like it. So the stripes here are 10 rounds with a 4 round of the gold in between each one, and they do look slightly smaller as you go up because of the needle size change, but not significantly. So I feel like it still looks very cohesive. And I picked these colors because of how the sun comes up in the winter. So you go from a very dark navy sky that sometimes can lean indigo, and as the sun comes up and if there's snow on the ground, you have these like hydrangea, periwinkle, lavender shadows from the snowdrifts, and then the warm sun casts this like beautiful peachy glow over everything. And when it's so cold, just having a little bit of that winter sunshine feels so warm and inviting, and it just brightens our mood so much when it can be really gray. And so this one is Winter Sun, and I just really like it. The amount of yarn I used, this one, I used 79 grams of the warm honey, about 24 grams of the hydrangea blossom, 21 grams of the night blue, and about 20 grams of the conch shell. And so in total it was about 145 grams. I forgot one more thing. Between each color change, I did one round where I only knit and did not add any purl stitches. That just gives it a very tidy break between all the colors. I'll show you what it looks like inside. It isn't necessary at all. It is purely how it looks. And then for weaving in my ends, I just wove them in as I went, and I carried up the gold color on the inside. So this would be the beginning of round side, and this is how it looks everywhere else. And so you can see the lines of the gold in all of the color sections, and that is due to the knit round that I did at the color change. So again, this pattern started out or was inspired by the cooler side of warm, and then it just changed a little bit into different things. And so I would say like the 1x1 rib one, I mean, the only thing that's more or less the same is the initial stitch count cast on numbers, and then the rest is all different. The length of the two I think are about the same. I measured them while I was knitting it just to see, because I knew I liked the length of the first one, so they're pretty close. I think the first one might be slightly longer, but not by much. Maybe not even at all. I'm not sure. When I'm wearing it, I cannot tell. They both wear very nicely, and I love this accessory so much. They were both fun to knit. If you don't love knitting 1x1 ribbing, then maybe follow the original pattern that has the stockinette portion in the middle. But if you do like 1x1 ribbing, then you can try doing the 1x ribbing all the way throughout. So again, these are my cooler side of warm variations, and I hope this has inspired you to try something out yourself. I think you can knit it in a variety of weights. You just need to play around with your needle size to see if it's a fabric density that you like. Maybe you want to use up bits of different mohair or Surrey alpaca lace weight yarn that you have on hand and hold it with fingering weight yarn, sport weight yarn, or DK weight yarn, and just kind of see where you go with that. I take zero responsibility in your exploration and your play. I feel strongly about other people being responsible for their own projects, and maybe responsible is too strong of a word or too serious of a word, but I do encourage you to play and try different things out. Everybody's gauge is different. Everybody's preferences are different. Some people like mohair on their neck. Some people just cannot even stand to think about that, or they'll break out into hives. So I just encourage you to play around with what you have and maybe see if you can come up with something that you are really excited to wear. Or maybe you want to make a marled one or a faded one. I know Melissa has another pattern that's very similar, and it is knit with 1x1 ribbing all the way throughout. It has 2 split hems, so it sits like a panel kind of in the front and a panel in the back, and then it is a marled fade for the rest of it. And that one, I believe she wrote for DK weight gauge. So that one is something to look for. I'll put a picture of that on the screen. I think it's called Flying Solo, or something to do with flying and something to do with solo. But that could be a really fun one. So I guess this one that's a 1x1 rib is kind of a mismatch of the two patterns. But yes, there's lots of inspiration. Both of those patterns are free patterns. I just wanted to share with you what came out of those patterns for me. With that, cheers to being creative, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.